Welcome to L&D Disrupt, the podcast dedicated to helping you overcome workplace challenges and prepare for the future of work today. I'm your host, Nelson Sivalingam, and I'll be speaking with the movers, shakers, and path breakers in L&D who are reshaping their organizations right now. Join us each week as we delve into the highs and lows of work in the industry to get to the real nitty-gritty stuff that you actually care about.
This week, I have two brilliant guests from the And Digital team with me, Daragh Gillen, who's Europe Academy and Onboarding Lead, and Harriet Perks, who is London Academy and Onboarding Lead. And as you would have guessed from the title of today's episode, we're going to be understanding what goes into an award-winning onboarding approach, because earlier this year at the Learning Awards, they won Onboarding Programme of the Year. And now hopefully we don't have to say of the year any more times. But first of all, welcome both to the show. And maybe just before we really get into it, tell us a little bit more about the award win, what that was like personally, and kind of what feedback did you get from the judges? What did they really like about your approach, the entry that you put forward?
Yeah, I think we're hugely proud, and it was quite a shock to us as well. It's one of the biggest awards we could have gone for. So just phenomenally proud of the team, really. And I remember one of the questions the judges asked us was, why are you going for the award this year? So anyone applying for future award applications, the why this year is a key question. Little tip there. And I think for us, it was just the level of innovation in our team. And we had huge, significant growth. I mean, at the start of the pandemic, there were around 600 employees. To go to, 1,800 in a very short space of time was phenomenal. So I think they were really struck by how we'd managed to onboard such a huge number of people in an incredibly short amount of time and still maintain quite an original, remarkable culture. You know, we've won Glassdoor's second place, best place to work in the UK. We're winning awards in the Netherlands now as well, Great Places to Work awards. So it's kind of how do you manage to kind of almost mass produce this system to get people into the company whilst also maintaining that really personal, authentic connection. So I think that was something they were quite struck by, and also the level of passion and innovation from the team, the number of changes we put in place as we scale as well was something that struck them quite a lot.
Cool. Yeah, Daragh, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would say there was also, especially Harriet, you're throwing me back now to that time when we did apply for it and the conversations we had. And it was like, yes, we should go for this because look at everything we've done. Because for us, I think, yes, looking at that particular year, we did expand. I suppose selfishly for me, it was a move to the Netherlands. It was to help us expand here. And there was a lot that we were able to talk about during that particular time, not just the successes that we had, but the learns, the challenges, the big challenges that we had moving to a different country, the culture, the fact that we were really keen on making sure that we could keep this people-centric culture that we were very proud of. And I think maybe, I don't want to say naively, but we kind of thought this will be no problem. We'll move into a new country, a new culture. It'll be great. That's fantastic. And we learned very quickly that, okay, well, maybe we were slightly naive thinking that it would be that easy to move in. So I think we were very proud of the work that we put in, how we'd overcome these challenges. We'd learned a lot, and we were able to talk about an awful lot in those particular awards application. So for us, it was exciting. And ultimately we were proud. So I think it's okay for us to say we felt like we deserved a place to apply for an award. But I'll leave you to decide that, Harriet. Maybe.
No, I think you're right. The sort of important things of an award submission is to show impact and to sort of take people on a journey. And like Harriet said, like the timeliness, why now, why in this context? So it sounds like you kind of nailed all of those things. Of course, we'll come to sort of how you structure onboarding, the process itself. But there were a couple of things that I think And Digital do really well I don't necessarily see other companies do and leverage into their full potential. So I wanted to kick off with one of those, and that was around authenticity and creating an on-brand onboarding experience. So without me giving away too much of it, I know you use your brand really intentionally during the onboarding process to make sure it feels like connected to the rest of the culture. I've been at companies before where they have a really strong brand and then all of that is completely lost in the onboarding, and it's like they're completely disconnected. And I know that's something you both do kind of quite intentionally when you build the onboarding process. So maybe tell us a little bit more about how you leverage the And brand as you build onboarding.
I think, that's a very good question. And actually, now that I'm reflecting on it, I'm now seeing the brand all the way through our onboarding. And now I'm like, are we using it too much, Harriet, in my head, if that's what's been... But anyway, I think, for us, we're very lucky from a lot of different things that one of the questions that we ask in the first week is how many people applied or heard about this company based on the and culture. That is a big thing for us. That is a question we ask on the first day. And I'm always surprised and always flattered to hear that actually majority of people put their hands up. That is one of the main reasons why people take an interest, why maybe they've applied, maybe why they've been referred. So for us, that is a lot. That's a big responsibility to then make sure that from day one, from before day one, that all of these expectations, what their friends have told them, what they've read online, what they've seen on news reports, articles, what they've read in blogs, that we match that from day one. And I think it's, for me, Harriet, if you don't mind me saying, I genuinely do feel connected to the company. I do genuinely feel like an Andy. I can remember what it was like joining a company where maybe there was a big culture and then landing into that company and being that slight disappointment where you think, well, everybody told me it was going to be amazing. Everybody told me this was great and they were super happy. And I'm not really seeing that. I did feel it. And I did feel it maybe a few weeks into it once I got settled and once I put everything else at mine. But for us, we know what it's like to go into day one where maybe being a little bit flat. And for us, we want to make sure that we don't get that feeling. We want to make sure that absolutely every single person who comes through the door had the expectation of and. They knew what and was. They maybe learned about it at a boot camp or at a university graduation type event or from a friend or an application. And we want to make sure that, yes, I'm seeing that from day one. And if people say to us, I feel like an Andy, even before day one, that for us is probably the biggest feedback we can get.
Yeah, Daragh, I just want to pick up on that point you made about seeing it, like actually making it tangible and visible. Because I think there are a few kind of tips we can give you guys for your own onboarding in your companies from what we do in And one of the things that we do with our brand specifically is create quite a visible, tangible community. So for example, even in the language we use, I don't know how much you've come across in social media and so on, but every person who joins our company is an Andy. We have and titles, and I'll talk about that in a minute, and anniversaries. Our inductions are actually called inductions or and boot camps, and we have this whole kind of like semantic field around what it is to be in our company that really kind of makes you feel like you can be part of it quite quickly. And again, we try and get people to orientate themselves in quite a tangible, visible community. So with we're building a very ambitious in-house HR portal. Equivalent to lots of other companies kind of use their own. You can buy them off the shelf, but we're building one for And in this, for example, you have your own section for onboarding, and you log on and you see every single person who's joining with you in your cohort, and they've got their profile pictures, they've got kind of a profile like bio, so where they've come from, like what their And title is, kind of any fun facts about themselves, so you can feel like you see there's like a lack of fear taken away from the unknown. You can see very much who's going to be part of your initial start in the company. And then to come onto the And title as well, a real kind of great way into building an authentic connection to the company, to each other, is by the way we share something in addition to our job title. So we always think, oh, you're more than just what you do. We all have unique passions and interests and hobbies. So the And title is an extra to summarize that. So for example, our founder, Paramjit Uppal, he's a founder and foodie. We have dancing dads, mindful meditators. Mine is intersectional feminist. So I'm a Onboarding Academy Lead and intersectional feminist because I'm really passionate about how overlapping identities affect our experience of privilege and discrimination. So, we all bring something new, and Daragh can share his in a minute as well. He's very, very talented, and I don't want to ruin the fun. But that's just another way, again, to really connect on a whole new level. And then another, I don't want to talk too much, a monopolized conversation, but another thing that we do that's quite interesting with our branding is that the visual branding. And you might have noticed, if you look at Daragh and myself on LinkedIn, anyone from the company, you'll see that we all have a photo with a red chair. And the red chair is very And. It symbolizes that everyone has a seat at the table. And by that, we mean that we all have shares in the company. So we're all owners in And. We're all really invested, literally, in the company. And also there's a real sense of this level playing field, this equal opportunity to really contribute. Our opinions and our voices really matter. We have a lot of say in how things are done in the company. So many different working groups of various communities within the company as well. So there are lots and lots of tricks and tips that we use to actually make sure that our people buy into the company and what it means to really be an Andy.
Yeah, I think it's that thing you mentioned, Daragh, as well, like it being a feeling. All of that stuff feeds into the fact that it's not like you're telling people what the values are in week 1 or 2. You're actually showing them what the values are. And like you become part of the collective, it's like a rite of passage. Now you have your picture in the big red chair. Now you have your title. It does maybe feed into that idea that this is a feeling, and when you feel like part of the team. Like often we could say, let's test people on the values and set them some sort of test, but that's just a question and answer type thing. But the feeling is like the more intangible is probably a better marker of whether actually people do feel settled. So I don't know, Daragh, if you want to just elaborate on that at all.
Yeah, I think that feeling, and I'm going to use the word again, Guy, which is that belonging, that like we are always a lot more engaged if we feel like we belong to something. That can be belong to a friend group, can be belong to a community, it can belong to something that we strongly believe in. So whenever you're at a company and you believe that you belong there, that's huge. And like I said, that sometimes takes a few weeks. And in my past, I can think of companies where it's maybe taken a few weeks, maybe even a few months to genuinely feel like I belong. So it all down to the, like you say, the particular stuff we're using, but also the language that we're using too. We do start our communications a good chunk ahead. We start at 3 weeks ahead before they've even started, which means that they're getting that contact 3 weeks ahead. They're getting to know our names. They know that, okay, well, Daragh or Harriet's going to take me through my onboarding. That's one person that I know if I have any questions, I can contact them straight away. And we're talking to them as if they're future Andys. This is the actual language that we use. Hello, future Andys. So it means that already we're using that language from day one. You've got a connection. This person, we hope, is showing that kind of purpose, that value, that Andiness that we have, that they're feeling that connection. They're future Andys. That language gets closer and closer. Hello, future Andys, we're getting closer. And then they're starting to get that excitement of, I can't wait to meet this person. This person's super excited. They're talking to me as future Andys. And then when it comes to day one, welcome Andys. And that means that we've made that transition of that excitement, the language that we use, into that day when they land. And we do ask again, like the question, what do you think the and culture is? And maybe I think sometimes, Harriet, I think we're maybe a little bit, being a little bit big to sort of ask that on like the morning of day one, right? Where it's like, what do you think the and culture is from the morning of day one? And we ask it every single time, but they know and they get it. From that morning of day one, we think about, okay, well, what have they had? They haven't just had the half a day onboarding with us. They haven't just had maybe meeting icebreakers in the morning. They haven't just had the emails they've had from us, but everything before that is pre-boarding too. The people they've spoken to, the interview teams that have interviewed them, recruited them. These are all current Andys that they've met. So they're already getting an idea of your culture, your community, your company way before that. It's not about just onboarding. It's about that pre-boarding, that recruitment. That is all onboarding to us. And the language and the belonging, the sense of belonging that we use from day one is all part for us onboarding too.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's those touch points people kind of overlook sometimes, and it's worth taking them in their totality, I guess. There is one other question I wanted to ask you that's a bit more outside the box before we get into how you structure your onboarding program. And if anyone does want to leave any questions in the chat, feel free. But something you mentioned to me before is about continuing to enjoy the process. So I think onboarding maybe it can end up like a lot of things, feeling like a hamster wheel. Like this is the process, we repeat it, we do it again and again and again, become a bit jaded to it. But I know part of your mindset and approach, which probably came across in your award submission, is that you want to continue enjoying your role, enjoying the ride, evolving the process over time. So yeah, how useful is that mindset, and sort of how do you foster that internally?
I think we have a real culture of, well, a variety of different things. So one is like radical candor. Actually, we have a real focus on meaningful, authentic, frequent feedback in our teams. And for example, when we will finish an onboarding instance, we'll celebrate this and give the coordinator who's put a huge amount of effort and time into it the chance to actually digest just how it's all gone, and we all kind of will comment and build each other up, and there's a real kind of sense of sharing, learning, and excitement about kind of discoveries and opportunities to change. So related to that radical candor, transparent feedback is a real culture of innovation as well. So we will regularly do competitor analysis. Dara's recently been to a fantastic talk in the Netherlands on onboarding, and we're constantly at kind of different events and having retros as a team, and always focus on the what if and what's next. So we never kind of rest on our laurels in the team, which is something that I'm quite proud of. So it's quite an exciting place to be. It's very much not just churning through the hamster wheel, but we do have lots of other opportunities. And then I guess another angle to this would be that we are quite omnivorous as a team. Onboarding touches on so much. It's a real foundation and for our incredibly unique culture and people's success in their working life. So we will connect with lots of different communities. And we'll end up being in various different places. Like, for example, one of my team is doing a comment with the comms and engagement team. We've got team members who have working projects with the emerging leaders team and looking at how we support that element as well. So I think we're quite connected across the business, and that keeps the engagement and interest to consistently feed back new ideas and new angles into what we're doing as a team.
Yeah, Daragh, how do you sort of see that as well?
Yeah, I'd add on to that as well, is that I suppose, like I say, whenever you're in other companies, and I still use my own experience in the past of whenever I landed on this word of onboarding that we use, feels like quite a recent word. It's not, but it's something that we've now thankfully started to take more seriously. And I've always done onboarding in previous companies, but it's never been this kind of. And I'm very lucky to work for a company at Ant who does respect and see the value of onboarding, which means they make it an event, which means that us as a team can make it an event. So whenever we talk to any of the other teams afterwards, maybe if we meet someone a year later, or we meet someone just while we're chatting in some other project that we're working on, they'll always talk to us about how much they loved and remember their onboarding. And for us, that is a massive impact, because you're led by one coordinator during that particular time, and you get very close to that coordinator during that particular time. And for us, as Harriet says, we look at things like secondment, squiggly careers, including being in different areas of the business, because we know that the skills that our coordinators and our teams are making within onboarding are so valuable to everyone across the business. It's not just simply seen as, okay, this person welcomed me, give me my laptop, get me set up, and then away I go. It's this person helped me with this, this, and this. They were a ear when I needed someone. They were someone to set me comfortable the whole first week. It's someone I still contacted, even just to joke with, a few weeks after that. And it means that, as Harriet says, our team has such a wide reach and fingers in every pie across the business, right? So it means we have so much is impacted by onboarding, such as neurodiversity needs, communication. We've got all the psychological safety, building great teams, working together across cultures. These are all things that we look at within onboarding that the rest of the business is looking at too. So why wouldn't we want to get involved in other projects that are going on? Why wouldn't we want to get involved in client support? Because our clients want great onboarding too. And if our clients want great onboarding and we're an award-winning onboarding service, surely our teams will want us to help with their clients. So for us, it's not just about doing that cycle of onboarding. It's about getting involved in other things and actually caring about what your Andy's do after that. I think that's a big thing for me, Harriet. I'm sure you feel the same way. You get very close to the people you're onboarding. We tend to onboard groups around that 17 to 19 type group. And when you're spending 3 weeks with those people, you do get very close. You learn to care about them. You learn about their personal life. And it means that as they go on, those connections are there. And you want to genuinely see how they're getting on. So whenever you meet them 6 months later, when we do kind of like a 6-month get back together, kind of like an onboarding reunion, you genuinely want to hear how they got on. You'd be like, yes, I'm so excited, genuinely excited when someone's went on to smash a client, or they've went on to maybe even do a progression within those little 6 months. And you can see that actually they're super excited to tell you because of that close relationship you've made with the team. So for us, it is about, again, back to that belonging and genuinely caring about the people we put through. For us, it's not just a cyclical kind of put them on the conveyor belt, get them through, put them on the conveyor belt, put them through. It is a close team that we have, and that caring and genuineness that we have for it is what drives us through as well.
Yeah, and I think actually, Daragh, you hit the nail on the head when you talked about us not just being kind of a here's your laptop, get set up a compliance machine, right? And I think Daragh came up with a really interesting piece of research. Some of you might be aware of this already, but if you're not, I really would strongly recommend that you look up Dr. Taylor Bauer's 6 C's of onboarding. And this is, again, something that gives us real meaning and purpose as a team. So let's see if I can remember them all. We don't just look at compliance. It is about clarification of processes and ways of working and expectations. It's about your confidence, and do you really feel like you can succeed here? It's about the culture and really being fully embraced as part of that. Connection. It's about the check-ins, so making sure that you're constantly giving and receiving feedback as well. And I know that I've missed one: compliance, clarification, confidence, connection, culture. check back. Anyway, I definitely recommend that you take a look at almost like auditing your own onboarding processes in comparison to kind of what really makes meaningful and impactful onboarding, because the fact that our team knows that we're more than just kind of an initial setup function, and Daragh, you mentioned those really meaningful relationships we build, kind of makes the whole process much more a source of pride for our team.
Yeah, we'll put a link to the 6 C's in the show notes after, in the email that goes out if anyone is more interested. I'm resisting the urge to say positive feedback loop for the 15th episode in a row, but a lot of what you said there is about those positive feedback loops. So it's really cool to hear that you're creating that internally, and then also making sure you're involved with other departments. We often say from an L&D perspective, like if you're not leveraging your marketing team to market your L&D, then you're missing an opportunity. So it's good to see that you're doing that. Daragh, just to bring you back in, we'll get now into sort of the structure of an onboarding program. Talk to us about what does it typically look like? Because I know you kind of created an approach that's can be used off the shelf, but can also be personalized with the ways people kind of split out into different roles. So yeah, talk us through that typical onboarding process.
Yeah, cool. So yes, simply if we talk about that kind of off the shelf versus the personalized one, of course, with our growth, we would love to personalize for absolutely every single individual Andy who comes along. But with the growth that we're having to do, this off the shelf idea that we have this 3-week or 1-week bootcamp or induction that we have for everybody that comes through means that it makes it easy for us to at least start with that, and also a basis for us to start with clients if they are interested in discussing it in the future as well. So our structure tends to start with 1 week of an induction, and every single person in our company goes through this induction. That first induction is trying to hit those particular C's that Harriet was talking about around culture, around compliance, trying to really make that feeling of belonging. They'll go through sessions that are culture-based. They'll go through things like getting their laptop set up, making sure they've got all their systems set up, because of course that is very important. So we have to make sure that that is all done on day one. We do look at soft skills very heavily in that first week. So we do look at things like dealing with ambiguity. We look at being able to work together across cultures, which was a big session we added last year with our international growth. We look at feedback is a big one. And I know you don't want to talk about feedback again, Gary, so I won't bore you with it, but we do a specific feedback session within that. Psychological safety. These are all the things that we look at within this first week. We also look at some whole brain thinking. HBDI is what we use, the Herman Group, for our assessment about whole brain thinking, which always creates some really great conversations within our groups. But ultimately what we want is to create that feeling of psychological safety, of belonging to a team. We want people to feel like they're in a safe space, that it's okay to make mistakes, that if they make mistakes and they fail, that it's a learning opportunity. And we talk about this all the time, and I'm not going to do the whole, you're right, the feedback, radical candor thing again. But if they feel that they can do that in week 1, again, put yourself in those shoes. Think about how you felt when you were going into your first job, or when you were going into a job. You get your laptop, you're sat at a desk, no one's come near you, you're doing your compliance stuff. You're kind of wondering, I don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing here. So, which means that if you don't know what you're doing, making a mistake is probably the last thing you want to make, right? So then weeks go by. So within that first week, we want that to be very clear from the start, from very quickly. Make mistakes. It's a safe space, psychological safety, working in agile ways of working, that we as an Academy and Onboarding team try to then work in an agile way of working with our retros, daily scrums, things like that, so that they can even see that the work that they put in their product and tech teams is the same that we do across the whole business, whether it be Academy, recruitment, or anything like that. Then after the first week, there's certain members of our team will go on and they will land into their clubs. They'll then meet their office. They'll continue on with the work that they're there to do. But we do look at our second and third weeks for a lot of our associate people in our squad teams, as well as anybody within that who's joining with a new squad. So we really want to look at that, building great teams in week 2 and 3. More mistakes making. We're looking at trying to look at how we do development work, how we do analyst work, how we do backlog things within our organization within and how we might do it slightly differently from other ways. But also we want to return people to basics. You might have worked in Scrum for 10 years, right? But that means that you've built up bad habits. So what we want to do is bring you right back to the start. Let's revisit the basics. So we revisit the basics for all of our teams within that second week. Then we give them a lovely little mini sprint challenge to work together, to create the team, put all the stuff that they've learned together, to create some sort of product for us at the end of the third week. They're working together in a team. They're self-managed within that time. We'll support them. They get a product owner. They get a little task. Then they have to present the task and the work that they've done within that week to the rest of their business. So it means that allows that at that stage, they've been in this kind of comfortable zone. We've protected them. They've been in this little playpen. And then on that last day, we invite everybody in their offices and their teams and their clubs to come along and see what they've built. And the great thing is that everybody in those clubs is excited, right? Because we've got a new person. We've got new people in our teams. We want to see what they've been doing. Maybe some people want to judge, et cetera, et cetera. It's the usual stuff when a new person joins, right? So everybody joins up to see what they've presented. They're excited. And then we end that 3 weeks with a little bit of a party, come together, a social gathering so that we can talk about the 3 weeks. They get integrated with their new teams a little bit more. And then they land into the club on that 4th week. So it means they go from this kind of, like I say, safe 3-week playpen that we're kind of defending them against all the work of the big bad world. Then at the end of the 3 weeks, we release them from the nest and they land into their club for the work that they've done. Hopefully we've looked at culture. We've built that safe space. We've allowed them to feel like they belong and that they feel like an Andy. So that by the time it gets to that 3rd week, they're genuinely busting, like, let me in. I want to do work. Let me meet everybody else. I'm dying to get jumped in. I'm ready. And that's exactly what we want. Excitement, enthusiasm, that they're going to hit the ground running.
Yeah. Yeah, Harriet, is there any sort of things you think Daragh maybe missed from that sort of process perspective? I know you mentioned earlier your CEO, I know he kind of gets involved at that top of that onboarding funnel as well. You kind of work with managers throughout that process as well. Is there anything you wanted to add to what Daragh mentioned there?
Yeah. Well, I mean, on that topic of the senior leader involvement, I think that's one of the things we talked about in the Learning Awards, actually, just how much buy-in our onboarding gets across the company, how it's supported across the company. So the fact that our founder spends 90 minutes with every single new joiner who joins the company on their first day, and they can ask them questions, they get that real access. There's such a personal connection. And even in the kickoff, for the first icebreaker that people have, and the very first time they join, is with a whole range of club executives and people leads, and people really care. They're really invested. So on that first day, you have real representation in the business. And I think that's really key. And then, yeah, Gary, you alluded to this. We have, within that first week, of course, we'll schedule the meetings with their line managers, their people leads. They all have a buddy. So they have this real kind of, again, the personal one-on-one sessions throughout their time with us, with all the other kind of cohort-led sessions as well, to make sure that they're really supported in a variety of different ways. And I think one of the things that underpins our entire process, which is quite interesting, which is actually probably one of the biggest things. My background is in teaching, for context, everyone here. And one of the biggest things I learned from teaching that I think we do really successfully at And is to make the implicit explicit. So I think it's very easy to take a lot of things for granted. But one thing we do really successfully as And is we really break things down. So Daragh mentioned we get everyone to really explore our culture. What's their experience of our culture so far? We really spell it out. We spell out the history of how it evolved, and actually what it means now, what it looks like in practice. Same with the sessions on ambiguity or feedback, whatever it is. We do not assume knowledge of our business ways of working or culture, and we do not let people kind of discover it for themselves ad hoc. We make sure that there's a real explicit support of what it actually looks like tangibly. So that's one of the things I really enjoy about our process that I think makes it so successful.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually have a couple of sort of follow-up questions, but just to remind people, if you have any thoughts you want to share or questions to ask, to drop them in the chat. But it's to come back actually to this one about kind of two things: psychological safety and helping people build up the skills for their job. I think a lot of the times we want people to feel comfortable, but we neglect that we want them to be competent as well. So we lean too much on this idea of we just need to make people comfortable in the role in the first few weeks, but really they need to be building skills, and this is the perfect time to fail. So how do you kind of push people just the right amount during those kind of practice scenarios or those sprint challenges at the end to make sure it's like the real thing and that they will probably fail and that's okay?
I think for us, that's the most fun part, Guy. So for us, I think really what we do is we try to get the particular teams that they're involved in to support us. So that means that they're going to have a product owner, they're going to have a particular analyst or a developer that they can lean on. When we have that particular product owner for their sprint, we will at times kind of chat with the product owner and give them almost like a character that we want them to play. Okay, we've got to know this particular team. We know that these particular people are quite confident and these people aren't. Can I get you to be maybe a cheeky kind of product owner, or maybe can I get you one who's not very available to try and recreate that client one where it's like, oh, can we put in a meeting? It's like, I'm not available till Wednesday. Short little responses to try and test them so that they understand what that kind of idea is. We also want to put people and push them outside of that comfort zone. And actually what we find is a lot of people who join a company really want to be pushed out of the comfort zone straight away because they want to prove that they can do it, right? So when it comes to particular roles, like, for example, Scrum Master, we might say, okay, we want someone who's never done Scrum Master before. And the most impressive thing for all of us is it's usually like a new university graduate or a job mover or a level 1 or a level 2, someone with not that much experience who is the first to put up their hand and say, I want to do that. Let me do this. And it means that then you've got these people who are less experienced mixed with people who are more experienced. The more experienced people will naturally want to support the people who are less experienced because that's where they see their roles coming into. They've joined and that's what our business model is, that not just supporting our internal Andes, but supporting our clients as well. So they already have that particular personality with us to support. And it means that in that safe space, they can fail, they can succeed. And then really what we want them to do is share those failures at the end, right? That's the question everybody asks on the presentation at the end of the sprint is, what was the hardest part? What did you learn? And that's where all the fun comes out. That's where they can have a laugh about it. That's where they can really measure, okay, well, if this is how easy I found it or how difficult I found it when it was in a simulated kind of safe zone, maybe these are the things we need to work on. But I will also admit that I think, especially in Europe, from our particular perspective, is that with the feedback that we've had, is that in some cases, yes, that safe space that we've had that you've just mentioned is sometimes too safe. Absolutely. And it means that if they go straight from that 3 weeks where we've had fun, we've been, going out for dinner, we've been having the crack, and then they landed the client on day one, and it's like, oh, hang on, my client doesn't like the fun that I've had on the 3 weeks. So what we have to do is make sure that we kind of meet that halfway. Maybe if we're aware there's certain people who are going on to a particularly challenging client, that we try to recreate that environment during the build week so that they're landing into that. And here in the Europe hubs, we're trialing some new things with us, is adding that kind of 4th week to our onboarding, which looks specifically at those hard skills that we're looking at. So we know that there's particular skills that we have in our offices and our clubs and our teams that maybe need a little bit of focus. And we know that there's a lot of people who join on because they want to focus on those particular areas, right? They know the parts that they're weak at. They know that those are the parts that the clients want, and they want to get the opportunities to work at that, get better at that. So we've put together trying to trial this 4th week of onboarding of a model, which specifically looks at tasks, hard skills, learning, upskilling, to then put that together to work on a project which is a little bit more focused on honing those skills, not just having fun and, making mistakes, right, in those 3 weeks. So we're getting on okay with that, but that's another example of us kind of being like, okay, let's listen to the feedback, not just of the Andes themselves, but also of their leaders, their managers, everybody going into that, about how we can continue to make our support, which is onboarding. Essentially, it's to make sure that they're ready to land into the clubs, to land into work. And if we're not doing that and people are telling us that there's pieces that are missing, we've got to try new things. So we're lucky that we have the flexibility to be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, Harriet, anything you wanted to add on that one? I know particularly from the psychological safety element, you probably had some insight. Oh, you might be on mute. Right. Yeah.
Interesting. Not consciously do that. Thank you. Yeah, can definitely touch upon that. I think also what I would say first is that we are, getting that on the topic of getting the right balance of stretch and support. Daragh, apologies if you mentioned this one, but we do obviously give them a technical mentor. So they get a product analyst and product developer who are really established in the business, who will kind of be there as a touch point if needed. So yes, we want them to experiment and enjoy the failure, enjoy the playground experience of a client simulated environment and so on. But we do very much have the existing Andes who will really invest time and support them where needed. And we also are, as an onboarding team, we have sort of effectively daily stand-ups with them until the final week when they're a bit more in flight. But we have a regular touch point with them, and we are collating feedback from various different trainers who've been in contact with a cohort over the week. And so we then, when they land into their club, their business unit, and they're free to continue client work and so on, we have a whole range of insights on this person that we can really articulate openly, so that there's a knowledge already of areas of opportunity for growth they have going forward, so that we can make sure that we support them in the right way as well. But yeah, in terms of the psychological safety piece, we have various sessions. I mean, Daragh alluded to some of them already, but I think one of my favourites is the Working Together Across Cultures, based on the Culture Map by Erin Mayer. It's a fascinating read if you haven't come across it already, although I'm sure many of you have. And it really explicitly breaks down the nuances of how we think and lead and communicate across cultures. And we have sessions on, we explicitly have a training session on psychological safety, as mentioned before, and also on HBDI, so our thinking preferences and how they flex under pressure. So we give people a lot of tools and techniques to be able to articulate where there might be tensions or points of clash, or so we really give them an insight into themselves, but also then how to work effectively with others as well, to be able to leverage the best possible teamwork from the start.
Yeah, and I think that feeds into what we said earlier. People have given the scenario where they can fail, and that's okay, and then also given the resources to understand how that fits into the culture, and that all feeds into that idea of feeling. Touching on something relevant to what you just mentioned there, Harriet, we've got a question in the chat about how do you own the process? Is there like a person that follows it from start to finish? Is someone like an owner that kind of works with the managers? How does it work?
Yeah, absolutely. We so we have a set onboarding coordinator. So we have a team. I don't know how big we are now, maybe 20. I don't know. We're always expanding anyway. So we have quite a large team, and we're based in geographical regions as well. And each team will look after their region. So at any one time, Daragh mentioned this before, they'll take a cohort of 17, 19 people odd through an onboarding instance. And if we have more people joining, then another onboarding coordinator from that region will take them through. So we always have a max cap on how many people we support. But this one person will be effectively the owner of all the core of the training, all other processes, pulling in various trainers who need to be there, scheduling various appointments, dealing with the feedback. They kind of look after it from flash to bang, and they're the ones who are in conversation with the new joiners before they start, and so on as well. So it's not in isolation, because obviously then you bring other people in to deliver some of the more technical training. The line manager will take on various sections as well, but they are very much the ones who kind of organize it behind the scenes. And obviously then as a team, we'll be innovating together, changing up process, debating things in retros and so on. But there is that consistent point of contact for the week. And what we're doing, I mentioned the in-house HR portal that we're building. We're actually automating a lot of our processes. So some of the early emails and so on, we've chosen the text obviously very carefully and got the right level of personalization with coding in there. But we do actually make sure that a lot of the ways of working are really simplified for our team, so that we can focus on higher level and more interesting things. All of our processes are defined very visually on an upwave board, so we know exactly what we need to be doing when. So there's that sense of consistency across the business as well. But yes, it is that single lead who takes ownership.
Cool. That makes sense. Good for consistency. You've always got a point of contact, I guess, and someone owns it start to finish. Daragh, this might be a question that's more suited to you, I think, from our earlier questions. But Pauline, did you want to come on and ask this question about tech stack and how you train people to use the tech?
Yeah, and thanks, guys. This is a really useful conversation, and one I've been dying to have as a head of HR for numerous small organisations. And listening, it looks like your organisation is a lot bigger. But I just wanted to ask you, if you've got a smaller team or a smaller organisation, how can you still provide that consistency of onboarding? For example, tech stack. So there'll be different applications that different team members need to know about. How do you guys train people, not just assume, like you were saying, assume they know how to use them, but really train them on the way that the company uses that tech stack, and making sure that they're up and running, instead of sitting there going, how do I use Slack, or how do I use Jiminy, etc.? How do you do that? That's my first question.
I think yes, thanks so much for your question. And on the back of what Harriet was saying, related to what you're talking about, I'm aware that we are in a very lucky position where we do have a dedicated onboarding team to be able to run all of these things. And I appreciate that in a lot of different HR departments, that isn't always the case. It does allow us to have that consistent contact, because we understand, like yourself, Pauline, when you're doing 100 other things, right? And then there's this new journer who's saying, can you help me how to use Figma? And you're like, mate, do you not see I'm trying to do all these emails as well? So we are in a very, unique position where we understand we've got those dedicated people who can answer those questions. And really it is because we recognize how important onboarding is. We know that whenever you don't have an answer to those questions quite quickly, or someone that you can touch base with, you can feel very lost, especially in this new world where most of us are onboarding at home remotely, right? Where it's even more difficult. So when we are aware that we are in a lucky place to be able to do that. But in your particular question around that, yes, when it comes to tech stacks and things like that, it actually came from what we're talking about right now as something we need to look at for next year, which is looking at that idea of other companies and how they're doing things and how we match that or learn from other companies. And I think something that we didn't do as well, but we're starting to get better at, is that idea of giving people that idea of what work they're about to start when they land into their business. So on to what you're talking about, if we know that when they land into that particular club, they need to know a particular tech stack, or maybe they're used to using a different Kanban board and we use Miro, or maybe they're used to using any particular type of software like Teams, but actually we use Slack. So it means that they have to get to know all of these things. We wouldn't in any way claim that we were experts at any of those things. We are L&D people, we're HR company people. So if they have a question about a particular tech stack, we probably don't have that particular answer within. But what we do recognize as an onboarding and academy team is that marketing ourselves, having those relationships, being able to use the connections that we have amongst the rest of the organization is hugely important to us. Everybody remembers their onboarding. Everybody speaks very highly of their onboarding. And I actually genuinely feel like we've created genuine close connections across the whole business in every department. So what we do is we, in our different hubs, stay very close to the everyday teams. I know that in my particular hubs, I'm aware of the clients that we're working with. I'm aware of the people who are the very high level technical people in our clubs who are aware of what's going forward, the skills that we need, the particular angle and direction that they're taking these particular clubs. So that means whenever people do land into these particular clubs and onboarding in Europe, I know, okay, I've been told already that by these people that they need this particular stuff and to look out for this. And maybe if that person asks me a question, I sometimes see myself as an operator too. They ask you a question and I know exactly who to put them in contact with.
Yeah.
We're exceptionally good at that during the Onboarding Academy team, is that we are that onboarding board.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, brilliant. Do you know what, Daragh? I have never used Figma before. I'm about to land into this. I've spoken to my squad lead on Monday and he's told me that I'm just about to land into a client and they use Figma. No idea. The great thing is that we've created that psychologically safe environment where they feel comfortable to come to me as a coordinator and say, hey, I don't know these things. And it means, okay, great. Well, you know what? Not only do you have a buddy, because everybody, as you know, the usual stuff, has a buddy that they can talk to, who we always aim to have that buddy as kind of like the same role, kind of around the same level, in the same club for them, so that they have that touch base. Maybe someone who's worked on that client as well. They can walk them through. If the buddy's not available, okay, great. Do we have someone else? Maybe their squad lead. Do we have maybe a product principal who's head of that particular part going into that client that we can pair them with? The biggest thing for us is that we want everybody to feel comfortable, settled, and ready to land. So if we recognize that these things aren't ready in the first few days, they've met their people lead, they've met their squad lead, they've met their line manager, they've met the other people on their club. Maybe on day one, they've spoken to their buddy about the clients that they're doing. And that maybe adds another heightened anxiety, which is, okay, well, I haven't used those things at all. Oh no, this is going to be a disaster. We can use onboarding to coordinate and pinpoint to tie with the right people. So we'll go out of our way to set up a meeting with, say, a product principal so that they have that one-on-one time. And then we're lucky enough to have that support of things like LinkedIn Learning, O'Reilly, whatever other kind of pathway support that we support people on afterwards. So it means if we don't have an internal course or some sort of course that we can support them with during that onboarding time, then it means at least then they have a contact person that they can feel, okay, this isn't so bad. I've got someone who's aware of what the stuff that I need to learn and who can direct me in the right place.
Lovely.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, Daragh. Harriet, just to see if you have any other thoughts, but before we get to that, Danielle also asked if you could share the name of that book again, please.
Yes, I'll type the name of that book in the next break in conversation. So thank you for time. I really can highly recommend it. She's a great storyteller. But yeah, I guess I would sort of touch on maybe three things in addition to what Daragh said, although he touched on one as well already. But one is our use of data, actually, which is quite interesting to me and it's quite new in the company. So we've now got, again, on our HR platform we call Luna, the ability to actually, for people to self-assess against a whole variety of skills and competencies. So on last counting, there were 314, which you wouldn't necessarily, it depends on your area of the business, you wouldn't necessarily rate yourself against all of them, of course, but you can then, what they've done is they've very explicitly broken down each skill that we need and whether it's a coding language or a specific behavior, and then you can look at what that looks like at a beginner level, novice, practitioner, advanced and specialist level, and they've got descriptions of what each level looks like. So it's not just kind of finger in the air, or what might this person be missing or whatever. It's a very kind of structured, explicit process where you can then see exactly where their skill set falls, and then provide appropriate tailored support accordingly. I think they're looking to white label it down the line, but watch this space. I'm not sure what's happening yet. And then along with that, Daragh, apologies if you mentioned this, but the career coaches, every single person in our company also gets this career coach as well. So we have a lot of focus, and a lot of our team actually delivers coaching and mentoring training. I'm delivering some to Intuit, one of our clients, later on today. So it's a big part of our culture in the company to have that really safe space to explore what objectives you actually need to meet and what skills you might be lacking and how you can get that support appropriately. And then Daragh mentioned, we have squad leads, but specific subject matter experts. And I know this is quite helpful because we're a very large company, but we have kind of these product principals and practice group leads and communities of practice devoted to specific areas and skills in the business. So whether it's Python or whatever it might be, we've got a community that's structured around that to make sure that people get the support they need as well. So it's a very divide and conquer approach to make sure that people get the specialist coaching that they need as well.
Cool. Yeah, perfectly. Makes sense to me. We do have another question that's a nice segue into
the next topic. Sorry, just one little thing on. Harriet mentioned about that leveling of yourself, that self-reflective, that kind of, okay, what level am I at Python? What level am I at React Native? And they have that where they can drag and, in a similar way with How Now, right? So it's that kind of where you drag the bar. For us, that's a great opportunity for us to talk about their growth, their development, the investment in their future development, what that support that they've got going forward. Because we know that whenever people land, the reason that people are joining companies or leaving jobs or doing any of this right now is if they don't see any investment in themselves, they don't see any progressive plan, they don't see any of that. So the fact that we are talking about that in week one, where we're saying, this is your internal HR system, you've got a career coach, you've got a buddy, you've got a mentor, this is what you can mark yourself on. Once you grade yourself on the levels, this is the plan that you've got to actually get better at all of those things. So it means during the first week, all of these things that they want about themselves, because we know that most people are thinking about, yes, the work that they do, but they've also joined a new company because they want to hit the ground running, they want to develop, they want to progress, they want to see a future there. And we're making sure that they see those possibilities from the very start.
Cool. Yeah, no, it makes sense. We're coming up with sort of the last 10 minutes, but there is one topic I really wanted to pick both your brains about, and that is how you collect feedback. So I have a confession, Daragh, but you mentioned this to me the first time we spoke, and then I explained it on another podcast that made me sound smart. So I'm sorry for plagiarizing you, but the point was that...
no credit at all, mate? No.
I think I might have, but I didn't name drop you specifically, but I did say, I was at least honest enough to say it wasn't entirely my point. But you mentioned to me before this idea that we collect feedback typically at the end of the onboarding process, but is that the most useful time? Because onboarding is there to set us up to do the job, and yet we don't collect feedback about onboarding when someone's actually done the job. So how do you go about this internally, collecting feedback when it can be useful and then also actioning it?
Harry, you're definitely the one for this.
Yeah, no problem. So we have such a variety of ways in which we collect feedback, I guess, and it is continuous. I think rather than kind of waiting to the end of the entire 3 weeks, whatever it is, we have a weekly retro where we get kind of much quicker views on how things have landed. But we also have the daily stand-up with our onboarding coordinator who's leading the instance at the time. So there's an opportunity to sort of check in at that point. We do have regular kind of reflection and Q&A sessions that are interspersed in throughout the first week in particular, to give an opportunity actually also to consolidate learning as well as provide feedback on how it's landed and so on. And then we kind of give people the space quite regularly to be able to have like a private one-on-one if they need or whatever. But I think it's more the point that I made earlier, that feedback is definitely two-way. And by having an explicit session on feedback, as Daragh mentioned, we do actually teach people how it's done and give them the expectation that this is two-way and consistent. And so I mentioned, we give the feedback to their people leads and the performance throughout the week and so on as well. And it's collected at the end of sort of every session by trainers as well to look at how things have landed and how they've what behaviors are demonstrated, what would be a growth opportunity as well. So there are various different kind of ways that we do this. And then we have sort of a session, sort of 3 months sort of catch up as well, when they've landed into their business units and we get to find how they are and so on. So it's like not just a kind of, you've done your onboarding, see you, bye. Onboarding is more ongoing. Yeah. So yeah, there are a variety of different formats we use, I guess.
Are those touch points there so that you can say, look, now you're in the job, tell us what worked in the onboarding now that you've actually tried to apply it? Was there anything else we could have done in that 3 months, actually, that 3 weeks maybe, that would have set you up more for this first period? Is that how it's used?
It's actually more at the moment. I mean, there is a lot of discussion about that. We do have kind of working sessions with sort of various subject matter specialists and people who've been through onboarding to review various things. So recently, actually, we've just sent out a survey to review our communications and how they've landed. So we do try to touch on specific topics for that. Now, the 3-month check-in, to be fair, is more of a social connection to keep the culture alive. But we do actually gather that data. I didn't mention the obvious one. In our, we do have also weekly surveys as well. I know we've got to be really careful of survey fatigue, but there is a really good take up here. And that's where, because someone in the chat mentioned actually what we assess, how we measure the success of our onboarding. So we will get an NPS score for every week that we do our onboarding as well. So net promoter score is really key for us. And that means that we can be much more, we can benchmark much more easily to other companies. And then we also look at a whole variety of things. Yes, we get them space to talk about general improvements and things that they really love, but also we look at how comfortable they feel about their knowledge of and how they have connected with their teams. There are a whole range of sub questions that we ask, how they found the pace of the week, and real spoiler here, this is often how we win a lot of our awards. We recently won silver last week in the in-house recruitment awards as well for our onboarding strategy, and it's because we have so much data on our process. So really, and the in-house recruitment team explicitly say, if you want to win our awards, you need to get the data, you need to prove how you're actually making this impact. So we have a whole bunch of questions there as well.
Cool. And do you find like internally you're collaborating as well with like line managers, team leads to understand if anecdotally is the stuff people are doing in onboarding, making sure they are kind of hitting the ground running, as you mentioned earlier, Daragh?
Yeah, I think just to expand on what Harriet says, there absolutely, for me, that is the biggest part. I think the data and everything is so important. Harriet's hit the nail on the head. When it comes to, Harriet has 6, 7, 8 different business units in London to look at this impact for, you know what I mean? So, and a much bigger team. Here in Europe, we have the 2 clubs expanding to 3, which is great with our supporting units as well. And that idea that, I hate to use the word happy sheets, however, that is ultimately what our end of onboarding sessions turn into, right? They're super happy. They're super thankful for your time. They're super great that they're in. They're like, thank you so much. That was great. High five. Can't wait to start job next week. And the results at the end of the onboarding are always great. I think what really hurt us was whenever we then rested on those laurels, right? We were like, well, everybody says our onboarding is awesome because we're looking at the happy sheets at the end of the 3 weeks. And that was whenever we had a closer time. So the great thing is that in our different hubs, we're recognizing that we need a closer relationship with that. So in our different hubs, we have different representatives for each club and business unit that we have, so that they create that closer bond with people like the people leads, the HR leads, the department people, the product leads, and the squad leads, so that they're able to tell us, you know what, let's meet after the 3 weeks. Let's get your feedback on this person. What did you feel? How were they good? And then we're meeting with that person maybe in and around the office. And what really hurts is when people sort of tell us, well, onboarding didn't prepare me for what it was like to be in the real job, or it didn't prepare me for what it was like to land on client. And I think that was where we really needed to go, okay, well, what can we do that's different than that? Those things don't come from happy sheets. They don't come from talking, you know, like the occasional, let's do a survey. They come from the coffee chats when you're standing at the coffee machine in the office, right? They come from when you go out on lunch together. They come from whenever you're just hanging around waiting to go into a meeting room. And I know we talk about how great it is to be remote and everything like that, but we've adopted a blended working model for our particular onboarding, which means that we do 2 days in person and 3 remote for each week. And for us, that is the sweet spot. We are a blended working model at and, so we want to reflect that within the onboarding. So whenever we meet people in person and they tell us these things, that's why we need to go, okay, what are we not doing that prepares that? And that those conversations, those interviews that we've started to set up, Harriet's done some amazing work setting up some interviews with people at that 3 and 6 month mark now recently to try and really visit, well, what is the impact on the work? And that's where, getting to Pauline's question as well, is where we learn those things about the different tech stacks that we need to support. The fact that we actually used to have the line managers and the people leads on day 3. But when we look at American onboarding people and the people who are winning that stuff, they're getting recognized for introducing that stuff on day 1. Because it doesn't matter how amazing your onboarding is, it doesn't matter how happy and culturally inclusive it is. There's always this voice at the back of your mind that's going, yeah, but what am I doing in my job? Yeah, but what am I going to do when I land in the office? So if we can silence that little voice as quickly as possible, it allows us to have that support when they land in the club, so that then it's a better gel that they land in and it's not so much of a cliff edge.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I'm going to say positive feedback loops. I'm doing it. because that is like you're showing people after 3 or 6 months, their opinion still matters. It's not just that early period when you're settling in. We've literally down to the last few minutes. So a couple of quick fire questions. One from the chat is, was there anything you learned that doesn't work in onboarding that you maybe tried and thought, you know what, this isn't a good fit, we shouldn't use that?
Well, the notice, the second part of the question was also, is there anything you've kind of pushed out a little bit as well?
Yeah.
One of the things, especially with the number of bank holidays we've got next, it's great next year, but also it makes our quite structured program of onboarding quite difficult. So we've pushed out some of the things that relate to elevator pitches, like client propositions, so what actually And is and what it does, and even the working together across cultures, because some of those skills are so key and valuable for building really meaningful client relationships. So some of the things actually we're going to push to sort of second, third, whatever week when they've landed into their clubs. So definitely things that we're kind of spreading out more, especially now that we've got our learning and development team who are much more involved in new joiners journeys early on. But Daragh, I know there are some things we definitely scrapped.
There's a few things that I could list, but I think over the past few years that we've been looking at, I think the biggest thing for me, Harriet, is that we really focused on the idea of that culture at the start, really that every little slot in your schedule being taken care of. So from 9 a.m. on the Monday to the 5 p.m. on the Friday, your schedule is laid out. You've got this session, this meeting, this session, this meeting. And we thought that was a really great way of doing it. Kind of like you don't have to think, you're not proposed. But actually the feedback that we started to get later on, when I landed into the club and further on, was, well, I didn't have time for admin. I was getting all these messages from people in the group and I didn't have time to, people wanted me to go to client meetings and I wasn't sure if I was able to do that. So we had to then say, okay, what of these sessions is really, really worthwhile? And which of these sessions are we just going to have to bite the bullet and just get rid of to make space for admin time, reflection time, really recapping on the stuff that they've done, but also securing that connection with their everyday club and not just the group they're onboarding with, right? And that's important too. So I think that idea that we wanted to take care of every single second was naive, I think, for us. I think it was very school teachery of us, Harriet, not that I'm blaming you.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing. That's really good, honest sort of insight. Just to paraphrase sort of one final question, is there space as well for people to go and access this material online so they can do it independently on their own time if they want to revisit on demand? Is that available?
In short, yes. In short.
Cool. All right, perfect. Well, like I said, we are really right at the end here. So massive thank you to Daragh and Harriet for joining us. I will pop their links to their LinkedIn profiles in the show notes and the email. So if anyone does want to connect with them, I'm sure they'd be more than happy with that. There'll also be a link to And Digital. So if you want to know more about who they are, what they do, and of course, a link to How Now in case you want to know a bit more about us and what we do. And then the final plug is that there's one more episode left this year. It's just going to be me and Nelson talking about L&D trends for next year. So if you can join us in a couple of weeks, it's the last week before Christmas, right? So it's a great way to block out an hour in your calendar, guilt-free. You can wrap some presents while you do it. Do what you please. Just have it on in the background. But lots of great feedback in the chat. So again, just massive thank you to both of you for joining us.